And welcome back to another Inside Texas live show, Thursday Night Live. And here I was thinking, we would have a nice little calm, quiet Thursday evening on our live show. We were going to talk about some playoff predictions, get into a little bit of offensive scheme. But as it stands, we're going to have a whole show about Texas's brand new defensive coordinator. That is Will Muschamp. Will Muschamp returns to the 40 acres, taking over for Pete Kwiatkowski. Dwayne Aquina also not retained by the University of Texas. And before we get into all of that, guys, why don't you hop on over to InsideTexas.com. Take advantage of the $1 flash sale that we still have going. Never a better time, man. So many great articles about this coaching change and what to expect posted today. Obviously, you had Connor and Eric's show earlier here on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, all the good things. But come be a part of our community, guys. $1 will get you a part of it. And again, never a better time. We have plenty of portal news coming. The portal opens up in less than 10 days now. So come be a part of the community. It just takes $1 to do so. Welcome back, Mr. Clint at Twitter, or on Twitter. You can find him at NBA Hornboy. And welcome back, Mr. Pack on Twitter at Pack Talks XOs. Gentlemen, how we doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing well, man.
Doing good, man. Definitely wasn't the news I expected to see today, but very happy about the news. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, and I mean this is definitely the first time I can remember Texas fans reacting to a coaching change in the way that we have. Seems to be a lot of head scratching, a lot of questioning of why this happened. But for me, real quick, I'll share my thoughts, and I'm happy to get yours as well. But for the 5 years that PK had been around Austin, we had a pretty average pass defense at best. You look at 2021, obviously it's hard to put too much blame on the guys. It's a first year new program. And then we had a lot of injuries back there in the secondary. It got better from 2022 to 2023. But then you have the caveat year where you have a Thorpe Award winner. You have the leadership and communication of a Michael Taft. You hit the jackpot in the portal lottery with Andrew Makuba. But you guys, what are y'all's thoughts? Were you shocked? Were you blown away? Is this something, Clinton, I heard you say you're excited about a change. Packy, you think this is something that Texas needed to have, and just give us your overall view of it?
Yeah, I think it's an immediate upgrade. I feel like my thoughts on a PK scheme have been pretty well laid out at this point. I think it was really vanilla. I think it was really basic. Even when we're talking about what he was doing on third down, where especially right now in college football, a lot of what you hear about and a lot of what gets fawned upon and what people really love to see is how exotic you can get on third down, right? With all the different simulated pressures. Last year, everyone remembers the first time Georgia and Texas played, where Georgia was walking up 6. They were stimming. They were then dropping guys. They were bringing pressure from everywhere. People remember the corner cat that Ewers got sacked on. And that's all stuff that people really, really like. And that's all on third down. That's generally where you see those exotics come. And when you compare that to what Pete Kwiatkowski was doing, it's really not that, right? At most, you saw some non-traditional Tampa 2 stuff where they would show single high. They would drop that single high safety to be the middle run through or the pull runner player. So just the high hook or the high hole. And then they would bring the star in a corner, and those two would be deep half players. So just generally, you're going to see just schematically, it's a lot more of a complex defense, which to me is a good thing, because the more complex you are, the more things that you do, the more multiple you are, the more you're able to take the game out of a coordinator's hands. And in college football right now, I think that's really, really important, because a lot of teams are RPO based on first and second down, right? They want to throw RPO slants, RPO bubbles, RPO hitches. And then on third down, especially when you get into third and long, teams really struggle because it's no longer about the coordinator, because that's when you see a lot of teams disguise, where quarterbacks are now having to read the field and they're having to make decisions and they're not being joysticked. And so the more multiple you are, the more you can confuse a quarterback, the more you force them to understand what they're seeing and then make decisions, the more likely you are to have success and the more likely it's going to be sustained success. Whereas, especially this year, you saw what can happen when people see Pete Kwiatkowski multiple times and there's a lot of tape on him. We saw what happened with Mississippi State. We saw it happen with Florida. We saw Georgia have a lot of success, where there was 5 drives maybe where Texas got stops. But if you watch that tape, it's a lot of run pass from Georgia. It's not them being the hunter, right? It's them trying to salt the game away. And then when you saw them take an aggressive approach again, it was very much like the first 2 drives. So you're going to just in general, what you saw this year was coordinators were really comfortable with Kwiatkowski, and not even just from the sense that there was missed assignments or there was busted assignments. Some of those busted assignments, I can tell you, were a result of the coordinator putting players in binds. Right? If you go back to that Vandy touchdown that was something like 60 yards, that the coordinator won there because they pulled Filsamy, they ran a seam or they ran a deep over, and they pulled one of the deep half corners away, and then Gilbo was forced to then squat under the go, or he was going to play with what's known as a sink technique where he's just trapping the flat. And because that deep half corner to Gilbo's side had to take the deep over, now that go is wide open, right? That's not just a missed assignment. That's a missed assignment because the coordinator beat Pete Kwiatkowski. And I think a lot of the busted assignments, when you really watch the tape and when you really understand what teams are running and what teams are trying to do, you start to realize that it's not just about Pete Kwiatkowski it's not just about missed assignments from the players, it's them being put in positions to miss those assignments. And that's something you saw more and more frequently as the year went on. You're not going to see that as much with Will Muschamp just because they do so much, right? They're going to play quarters. They're going to play one on third down. They'll run the non-traditional Tampas. They'll play cover 3. They'll show press a lot. So it's a lot more multiple in that way. And so to me, it's a significant upgrade.
Well said. Yeah. Welcome, Mr. Evan, to the panel. Real quick, go ahead, Clint. What are your thoughts on it, brother?
Like I said earlier, I was very shocked. I don't know if I was necessarily shocked about PK being fired because I feel like PK was he was a guy that a lot of guys were 50-50 on, I feel like, because at times you did see him manage games well. You saw him have some pretty good games in terms of his game management, but as Pac said, his schemes are not very complex. They're very vanilla. You also did see a lot of times, though, where, especially in the Georgia game, is the biggest example for me, was how far back his corners would play. You're giving up a bunch of underneath routes. They're getting about 7 to 8 yards of play, and they're just moving the ball downfield. You can't have that happen every year. You can't, because also one of the big problems was his consistency, in my opinion. I feel like he could be very consistent at times, and even though we wouldn't give up a lot of points in some of those games, I feel like a lot of that more so was with the talent and the athletes that we had rather than his schemes and what he was drawing up. So I'm glad that we moved on from him. I like Will Muschamp a lot. I didn't get to watch him, was too young when he was at Texas. Maybe my first season watching, he was our DC, but I like the hire. I'm very excited for it. And just excited and surprised about the change.
I think we all are caught pretty off guard. Inside Texas has said the same thing. I believe Eric said he almost drove off the road. Evan, what about you, man? Were you safe when you heard the news? Any danger to you and what you were doing?
Yeah, fun story for me. Eric loves to joke about F5ing. I F5'd onto the website, saw his thread before the thread that says F5ers rejoice. And I was like, is this guy going crazy? Like, what did he do? Immediately after saw the news. So I was probably one of the first 10 people that laid their eyeballs on that. I was stunned. I mean, I get what people have said about PK. I think it was more of a 75-25 like to dislike of him overall. But, Eric had hinted that it could happen. But, man, that first left field that it happened today. And secondly, that it was so quickly that Will Muschamp was hired. I could not have seen that coming from 1,000 miles away.
I hate the way my mind works because the very first place I went to was like, we should have done it 24 hours later, right before Oklahoma was getting ready to line up and play Alabama. It was going to be talked about, but no, definitely. I mean, I get it, man. Surprised as well. I know that Eric had mentioned, it's a possibility. We knew Akina was out the door. It was just a matter of when does this happen? It wasn't in no doubt it was coming. But yeah, then we didn't expect, in my opinion, I didn't expect the mega bomb that we got today between PK and Dwayne Akina. Now, I'll say this: I'm grateful for PK. He improved the unit. Again, we laid out some of the inconsistencies. We talked about pass defense. He did have to have Gary Patterson come in and match the back end of his defense to the front end of his defense. And then I think we saw that slip a little bit the further we got away from Patterson's time here helping out. It looked like at times this year, like what the front was trying to do was not married to what the back end was trying to do. And maybe that's just my perspective, but I get it. Like I get it. we put Oklahoma and A&M in a box the last 2 years defensively. I mean, that's fair to say. But let's look at those two games. And the Oklahoma game year one or last year, they don't have a quarterback. Say what you want about Michael Hawkins. He's not ready for that game. You go to Marcel Reed. They have no running game. They couldn't protect Marcel. And again, you saw that similar to this year. So I see a lot of our rivals that are, they're dancing about this news today. They're very excited. And I just want to say, be careful what you wish for out there. Because this is a Texas team that's going to look a lot different, especially from an aggression standpoint on the defensive end. Going to do things in a completely different way. So last time I'll say it, but grateful for PK, grateful for where he's helped elevate this defense. But at the end of the day, I'm completely and 110% okay with this move. I do like Will Muschamp. Many will bring up the fact that he, failed as a head coach. Being the head coach of a major D1 program and being the defensive coordinator are two completely different cats. I mean, this is a whole different ball game. Does he have to go back and reprove himself? Possibly, because it is modernized offense and he hasn't called defenses in, quite a while. But he had a very big hand in what the Georgia Bulldogs did in 2021 and 2022. Probably a bigger hand than most people even realize. But with that being said, let's talk about some of the differences between the two. You got PK here. You got Will over here. Very, very different styles. As Pac pointed out earlier, what you saw was what you got with PK. In preparation, it wasn't anything like super detailed or crazy. You had a good inkling on where these guys were going to be. But as Clint said, a lot of times Texas is superior in talent, superior in athleticism, and Texas definitely relied on that on both sides of the football. To be honest, it seems to be a bit of a trend. But let's go first with blitzing. We didn't see a ton of blitzing from PK in his time and tenure as DC at Texas. Pac, talk to us about Will Muschamp. Will we see a lot more pressure? We'll start there.
Yeah, you will. So in terms of what type of pressure, so you're going to see a lot of what's known as eyes pressures. All that means is it's 3 deep. So think cover 3, just without the 2 flat defenders, right? So in normal cover 3, it's a deep third corner, a middle field safety, 2 flat defenders and 2 hook defenders. So all eyes is you remove those 2 flat defenders and you think of those as blitzers. So it turns into a 6-man pressure. If you watch Saturday or 2 Saturdays ago when Georgia and Alabama played, you'd see a lot of eyes pressures. They ran them a lot on second down. They ran it on third down a lot. You can even run it on first down. You can look up. There's a very old clinic of Kirby Smart talking about eyes pressures. I think it's called the TFL study. You can look it up. And all it is it's basically the perks of cover 3 are you're playing 3 deep, so you shouldn't get beat deep. And so it's a way to get tackles for loss in the run game. It's pretty good on pass downs because what you can do is you can bring anyone you want on pressures. Georgia brought a safety on one of their eyes pressures. They brought the star and the mic on another one. It's pretty flexible in terms of what you're doing from a pressure standpoint and who you're bringing. So that's one of the ones you're going to see in terms of pressures. You're going to see a lot of Tampa 2 simulated pressures. That's standard across every single college football team right now. Well, you'll see a lot of guys show cover 1, and then they'll drop the 2 inside defenders, inside cornerbacks, and they'll bring that middle field safety down to be a pull runner or a middle run through player, a high hole player. So you'll see that. You'll see what are known as Big 12 pressures, where they're running quarters to the field and then they're running cover 0 into the boundary, where it's basically blitz coverage down there. So you'll see a lot of different pressures. Just in general with anyone from this system, right, the Saban system, the coverages are going to be very, very multiple. There's a lot of things that go on there, but the pressures are really, really dense. There's a lot of different stuff in there. I talked about 3 pressures. I could go into an hour-long spiel about all of the different pressures that this family has. They have 2 trap pressures. They have 2 roll. It's endless, right? It's the best defensive structure. It's the best defensive scheme in all of football for a reason, and that's because they have so many answers and they have so many ways to attack protection. So yes, they will pressure more. They'll have a lot of pressures. You'll see new things week by week, and that's part of what makes Muschamp and this entire system of defense really, really good.
Well said, man. I think you nailed that pretty dang well. we wanted a little bit more aggression. I feel like the majority of Texas fans wanted just a hair bit more of aggression. Evan, when you see Will Muschamp and you know what you know about PK, what's the first major difference between the two coaches that jumps out at you?
I think a lot of it's personality. Like I remember when we talked to PK when he came out for the one day that Texas gives you to talk to assistant coaches the entire year until you get to bowl games, believing around March. You know, PK came in with a little bit, and not swagger's not quite the word, arrogance isn't quite the word, just a little bit of this kind of my results speak for myself, which fine way to carry yourself as a defensive coordinator who just came off a season where you had probably the second best defense in the country behind Ohio State. And I get that, but when I think of the Texas team and their really big leaders on the squad, you're talking Sarkisian, who vocal, not with the defense as much. Kyle Flood, not the most vocal guy. Banks with his special teams for sure. And then you had Pete Kwiatkowski surrounded by a bunch of less vocal guys, apart from Dwayne Akina, who we know how that worked with Akina. I think you're getting personality-wise a guy who's going to be much more aggressive, much more of a in-your-face, I'm the head honcho here, which I think some of these Texas players needed a little bit last year. And we're talking about a really young team. And a lot of the young guys that we were kind of looking for that second step from in 2025, you know, I think you got it a little bit from Tyanthi Smith. You definitely got it from Alex January. But how about Derek Williams coming back from injury and Xavier Filsaime and Kobe Black? I mean, those guys, either they didn't really hit it or it took them quite a long time. So I think this Texas unit needed someone that could really hands-on be in the face of these guys and say, like, hey, this is not the year to be complacent. I think there was a lot of complacency with this team last year. And 2026, we know it's not an or bust. Sark's not going to get fired if he doesn't win a national championship. But it is a bit of an or bust. You're not going to have Arch Manning and Colin Simmons after this year. This is it for probably the two most talented guys you've had since Bijan, and then before that, who knows since when. So it's definitely an identity change for Sark. I do think there's a little bit of covering himself, not to get too negative on the hire, but it's a splash hire that distracts you from the offense, which the offense is really what needs the most help for this Texas team. So I do think it's going to be an upgrade overall. It's one of those things with, if you think about soccer, promotion, relegation, PK was the guy who got you up into the top tier, the top division. But at some point, you need the guy who can win at the top division. Maybe PK is that. I'm not quite sure. I think Muschamp for sure can be that.
And that's the thing, man. It's energy. It's on-field presence, practice. He's going to have these guys fired up. And again, that's not to knock PK, not to knock his style, his demeanor, or personality. It's none of that. It's just Muschamp style. We've seen it in action. We've seen it in Burnt Orange. We know what he looks like. He's very fiery. It's very easy to want to play for somebody that I can't tell you how many Twitter comments just from that 12-second video I posted about him smashing the clipboard back in 2008. I mean, I had like 20 people saying, like, I want to go play for him right now. And like people that weren't even Texas fans. So again, everybody kind of seems to get behind that type of energy, that type of juice on the sideline a little bit easier. Texas lost to Tashard Choice, in the first season without him. It felt a little bit like we were missing that guy that can really, bring some attitude, bring a little bit of an aggressive demeanor. Again, that's a different coach on a different side of the ball. But I'm a fan. I really am a fan of the energy, the passion that Muschamp coaches his guys with. It's win at all costs, win at all costs for him. And that's something that I can truly, truly get behind. Guys, we'll keep rolling right here. We'll talk more Muschamp. We'll talk a little more PK. We'll get into Sark and the offensive side of the ball too. But first, we're going to go to our sponsor, Laura Baker.
If you're looking for a home in the Austin area, there's only one number to call. That's Laura Baker at 512-784-0505. Laura's a part of the elite Andy Allen team at Keller Williams Realty. She's helped Longhorns find their dream homes all over Central Texas. You can just ask our very own Ian Boyd, who moved from Michigan to Texas with Laura's help. Whether you're searching in Austin, Round Rock, Georgetown, San Marcos, or even parts of the 254 or the 210, Laura has you covered. So call 512-784-0505, or you can email her at laura@andyallenteam.com. She's a Longhorn, a friend of Inside Texas, and the person you need to call to get your next home in Central Texas. Call Laura Baker today. Contact info is in the description.
All right, guys, back at it. PK out, Muschamp in. Now, we do have questions from the comments section. Pack, I'm going to let you attack this first. Does Muschamp run the 3-3-5 tight like Kirby or even the mint front? What you got for us on those?
Yeah, he runs the mint front. If you hear the word tight, that's more of a thing that you associate with Dave Aranda. That's more of a Dave Aranda thing than it is a really a Saban thing. The Saban tree tends to run more of the mint front, where you've got a 0, 2, 4 eyes, and then you've got what they call the jack. Texas calls this the buck. And that jack is really, it's just a stand-up edge rusher. It's an outside linebacker. It's Colin Simmons. And the way that the tight front works for Aranda is it's more of a drop 8 concept. The min front tends to be more of a, there's two ways it can go. And this is, they'll use what's known as Ralph and Larry calls. Ralph is right, Larry is left. And that'll tell you who's activated, and all that means is if you're activated, you're rushing the passer. So the way the mid front works is the camp rules. So the base rule is the outside linebacker drops to the flat, or typically it's to the flat because we'll just assume he's into the boundary. So he's dropping to the flat, and if they're playing cover 3, he's a 4 to first player. So all that means is if you count it from the field, he's got whoever 4 is. And if 4 goes under, you're looking for the first across the field. And if they're in quarters, he's just got the quarter flat. So he's playing what's known as a bang to buzz. So he's just working through the seam to the curl to the flat. So yes, he does run the min front. I'll just generally say this as a rule of thumb. He's going to run exactly what you've seen the last 3 years at Georgia. There's not going to be a whole lot of variance or deviation from that. If there is, I'd be pretty surprised just because that is kind of what he ran at Florida. Now, there's some stuff that changed since Florida. They didn't run the min front back then. They ran more of an odd front, but they will run the min front now. So they'll run the min front. It'll be probably, you'll see this a lot on first down. It'll be their what's known as par down, which is just pass and run. That'll be their base way to play it just because of the way you can handle the RPO game, the way you can play split safety from it and do all the different things that you want to do. And if you really wanted to, you could run concepts like bracket and other more heavy man match concepts out of mint, which is why you see Georgia, which is why you saw Florida with Ron Roberts, why you see Oregon with Dan Lanning, why you see Ole Miss with Pete Golding, all these different people that are part of the Saban and Roberts trees. They typically run mint on first and second down as a way to not only stop the run because it's really good against zone read and zone run. It handles inside zone because you take away B gap, and that's what a lot of the stress of RPOs come from is off of B gap because we can get. I can explain this a little bit more if you need, but linebackers when they're reading something, they're typically in 30-30 alignments. If we're in a 2x2, all 30-30 means is you're shaded off the guard. You're on an outside shade of the guard, and so if you're in an even front. I want you to think of an even front. There's a bubble, right? Because you have either a 1 technique or a 2-eye. There's a wide open B gap. And what you'll see a lot of teams do on offense is they'll flip the back to the same side as the bubble because what ends up happening is that linebacker has to fill heavy into that B gap. Otherwise, it's wide open. And they typically throw the slants behind that. Whereas with a min front, both of those B gaps are closed. So linebackers can play a lot slower and they can play the RPO game first and then fit the run off of that. So that's why a lot of teams like them in front. There'd be no reason for Muschamp not to run it. In fact, I'd be pretty shocked if he didn't.
And I mean, it's all over college football right now. Dan Lanning, obviously a big user of the mint front. Obviously, we've seen where he spent time as far as being a defensive coordinator. Real quick, Pack, for the people that don't know exactly what a mint front is outside of the linebackers and where they're filling in the B gap, what does mint mean to these guys?
Yeah, so it's just a 3-down front. So think of as 0 techniques, that's head up on the center. And then you've got 2 4-eyes. So you've got 2 edge players who are playing off the inside shoulder of the tackle. So all those guys are doing is you think of their nose or their helmet is going to play on the inside sole of their inside foot. So their head is basically right on line with that foot, the inside foot, and they're reading keys based off the tackle. It's basically just a way to, because you've got a 2-gap nose, what you've done is you've basically shortened the number of players that you need to fit the run from a full box because you're 2-gapping, so you're taking care of both A gaps. Both your B gaps are closed, and now the backers can play a lot slower, and they can play what is known as ball fits. So they can fit the run based off of what the running back is doing. So they can tempo off the back. They can match their footwork based off the back. or if the back is working laterally, you'll see Georgia linebackers, their footwork is lateral, right? So they can tempo the back, they can funnel off the back, and they can fit off the back. And it allows you to be a lot more sound in terms of how you're fitting it, because you always have a more patient, your linebacker is always super patient. So they're not going to be in bad positions. So that's how the mint front works. It's just a 0 technique, 2-4 eyes, and then what's really a 9 technique. So you've seen Texas run this a lot. You saw this against Texas A&M. It was actually the very first snap they were in a mint front. So it's just a 0 technique, 2-4 eyes, and then a 9. Does that kind of explain it?
No, absolutely. I think you did that well. I mean, obviously, Pack is incredibly well versed in mint front. This is basically Christmas come early for the guy because he's a Saban disciple, if you will. Just might not know the head man and not have worked underneath him, but this is for me, it feels like this is a tip of the iceberg. Pack could get into everything that we're going to want to do under Will Muschamp, that Kirby Smart is doing over there, that Dan Lanning's doing. So this might be the first of several breakdowns as far as looking at their defense. Clint, knowing what you know about Will Muschamp, I know you're a bit too young to remember his first. I asked on the timeline today. I was like, do I get my last 20 years back since Muschamp's like back at Texas? Like, do I get to go back in time a little? Because it kind of feels that way. But do you think that where Texas needs to put its focus in the portal on the defensive side of the ball, do you think that needs to change based on what you know about Muschamp and his scheme? Or do you think it overall just kind of stays the same? Clearly, we need to go after some linebacking depth. I mean, that's pretty obvious to everybody. You got to have guys to run his system. But what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, just what you said right there, the linebackers, I think you definitely need to get some. I'm still with getting some defensive tackles, but especially nose tackle. But other than that, I don't think you change too much. I think with Texas, we have the athletes that we need for a good amount of the defense to run what Will Muschamp wants us to run. I wouldn't be necessarily opposed to getting another safety or possibly even a corner. But other than that, I don't think you change too much of your portal strategy with Muschamp coming. I think that he's a great teacher. He'll be able to teach a lot of the guys in the program the defense that he runs, what he runs, how to run it, and I think he can develop them really well. I mean, he's one of the best developers in the country from everything I've heard. So very excited to see him. But yeah, I don't really have much more to say other than that. But I think you just kind of keep it very similar, but maybe get an additional guy at each position.
I can get behind it, man. We do need some depth. Hopefully playing a lot of ball games next season well into December. Evan, for yourself, sir, does it concern you at all that, Will Muschamp has not been, a defensive coordinator and been calling games in quite some time? Do you think there's a chance, that he doesn't adapt to modern offenses as well as some other defensive coordinators have? Just what are your thoughts on that whole subject?
I'm not as concerned about specifically calling the plays on defense. So much of the defensive coordinator's work happens before the games happen, a little less so, or a little more so than an offensive coordinator where you're reading, reacting. Of course, Muschamp has to know what's going on in the game and make the call to associate with it. And it's a little bit, 2015 was the last true time. I don't remember exactly what he was doing at Florida, but when Schumann and he were the co-DCs, he was more the behind the scenes. Schumann was the out front, I'm going to call the plays guy. And of course, they had a ton of success with that. So I do think the mind's still there. He clearly knows the current game. I mean, he really out-schemed Texas the last 2 years that they played each time. I mean, that's when I think of what that defense has done, I'm thinking about Jalen Walker and Chris Cole coming in as linebackers and doing those replacement blitzes and getting Chaz Chambliss into the flat making plays. He knows how to beat these offenses. And I think Sark's about as modern as you get when it comes to like the NFL NCAA merger of how they go. But Texas is going to play a lot of different types of teams. I mean, you got your veer and shoots all over the schedule, but you'll still have your Kiffin and your Kiffin disciple. And then you also have, Missouri, who's just going to run a ton of outside zone and say, hey, our running back's better than every player on the field outside of maybe one guy who we're going to run away from on your team. So that's the real tough part for me, is how instant can you get it and how much can he adapt to week over week. Not only are you seeing different teams, but this is a more loaded schedule than any team's ever played in college football. I mean, you're talking 9 conference games and Ohio State. Even if some of these conference games disappoint by the level of play, that's 10 total teams you really got to get up for. And Texas State and UTSA are better than FCS schools. So that's my only thing where I'm a little bit like, hey, is he going to be able to transition it that fast? But I don't have any doubts that he's going to be able to get the team ready and up. It's not going to be that hard to do that part of the job.
No, well said, man. I'm not too worried about, him being away from actual defensive coordinator, the title. I'm not worried about that because, again, I know that he had a hand in those Georgia defenses. I know that he still is very much involved in, modern defense and how things are changing. So really well said right there, Evan. Let's go ahead and go to David McClellan, and we'll come back for the back half of the show.
Big financial decisions don't have to feel overwhelming. There's someone who can guide you every step of the way. David McClellan is a fiduciary financial advisor with Forum Financial, and he's working closely with his clients as a true financial life coach, guiding every aspect of your financial journey with expertise and care. If his name sounds familiar, that's because David was a swimmer at Texas and a member of several national championship teams. Today, he channels that same championship mindset into helping people win with their finances. David specializes in financial planning, and he's contributed numerous articles to Kiplinger on the topic of retirement tax bombs. And right now, David is offering viewers a free intro consultation to assess your financial situation. Do not miss this chance to get personalized guidance from a trusted expert. To schedule your free consult, email David at dmcclellan@forumfinancial.com, or you can call him directly at 312-933-8823. The contact info is in the description.
All right, guys, going to keep going. Got about a half hour here. Evan, you brought it up. What does this defense look like week to week? How do we adjust? Are we changing what we do and making offenses react to us? Pack, game plan specific, is it going to be changing on, game plan? Will it change week to week, opponent to opponent? Or is it going to kind of be, we line up and we do what we do?
Yeah, it'll change. It'll change quite a bit, actually, to the point that they actually change. So once again, this is a thing that is uniform across every single coach in the Saban tree or in the Saban system defensively. They have what's known as cover 7, right? And that's just man-match quarters. What you'll see is on a week-to-week basis, they have 3 different checks they'll do just to cover 7. They'll get 7 custom, they'll get 7 calls, and they'll get 7 special. And those are 3 entirely separate things, all within 1 week, where 7 customs will be about what are we going to do on first and second down. So how are we going to tweak what we're doing formationally, right? So maybe versus one formation, we're going to play this coverage. But if they motion to this, we're going to play something different. And they can adjust that week to week, where they have camp rules where maybe 1 week they'll run base quarters against 2 open. The next week they're going to bump and they're going to play bracket, or they'll play switch, or they'll play cut, or they'll play whatever, or they'll play vice. So what they're doing is every single week it's dependent on what route concepts are you running. Are you a team that runs a lot of, let's just say your main concept is dagger? Well, then they're probably going to switch they're probably not going to play mod against that because that's a quarters beater. So they'll do a lot of different things, not only just within cover 7, where they're adjusting every single week. They're adjusting their pattern matches. They're adjusting leverage. They're adjusting how they're playing their safeties, where maybe safeties are first starting their progression from looking at the end man on the line of scrimmage to get a runner pass key, where they're reading the knees below, or if they get a back step and it's a pass key, they may change it 1 week because the team runs a lot of RPO action. So you're not going to get a key from a offensive lineman. They might switch it to read the number 2 receiver and read his feet and then go to a run pass key. So they change everything from how they're playing coverages to what coverage they're playing versus certain formations to what they're going to do to a specific receiver, where if they have someone like Jeremiah Smith and they want to double him, well, that's a part of their 7 special family, where they might run what's known as cones or brackets on Jeremiah Smith and then tweak coverages everywhere else. So to answer your question, yeah, they'll adjust so much so that they have a specific adjustment for a specific coverage family that they run. They'll do the same thing with cover 3. They'll do the same thing with their 2-man concepts. They do the same thing when they're trying to play cover 1. They're super meticulous about how they adjust and how they change on a week-to-week basis. You'll see this even more so with their pressure paths, where if you watch Georgia against Texas and then you watch them against Alabama, the pressure paths are wildly different, right? The coverage concepts look the same, but you don't know that they've adjusted 3 things in their pattern match where their eye progression of the safety is different and the corner's playing on different leverage. His eyes are in different spots. And that's not to include that they've brought a new path now. They're running a different coverage here with that specific path that they've shown in the past. So they're incredibly multiple. They absolutely adjust on a week-by-week basis. And pretty often it'll be smaller stuff that maybe you don't notice the first time that you're watching on a TV copy, or maybe even the first time that you watch it on the All-22. But the second and the third time, you can kind of see what's going on and you figure out, okay, they adjusted to this. Here's what they're doing and here's why they're doing it. But yeah, they're absolutely very intentional about how to adjust and how to be super specific to an opponent.
Really well said, man. He's going to be multiple in his attack. Evan, do you expect to see 3 down? Do you expect to see 4 down? Do you expect to see a mix of both?
Yeah, I think you're going to get a lot of that 3 down with a true up edge. It's not going to be as much of this buck jack action that they've been doing with Pete Kwiatkowski. And I think that does, it depends on how the strength and conditioning works, which I also think is a big benefit you get with Muschamp. I mean, there's been strength and conditioning problems with this team that have kind of been covered up the last 2 years, was not covered up this season. I do think you've got 2 guys in Lance Jackson and Justice Terry that can play that kind of true defensive end style of defense where you're not really an edge, you're not really a defensive tackle, you're just an end. And that's where they can, if they get Terry in the right shape and Jackson a little bit bigger, then you can run 3 down, and they're probably going to need a true nose in the portal, at least one. I think that's something they needed since the season started. They knew that they were going to need one because of Sean Brevard's eligibility. Maybe they go 2 like they did last year. If they can just find one, then you have a rotation with Kanu if he comes back, January, Watson, and then whatever extra you get from these younger guys. Suddenly you've got a lot of beef on the interior, and then you have the skill of Jackson and Terry, who, year 2 Terry is going to be a real player for this team. And then obviously Colin Simmons off the edge. I'm curious at how it looks once Simmons is gone. I think it's going to be so easy to just say to Colin, hey, you're going to have to drop into coverage a little bit in these flats like Pack was referencing. But a lot of times you're just a stand-up edge, and you're going to be shooting right at the quarterback one-on-one. I know he likes to run a lot of just, it's a lot of replacement, but at the end of the day, it's rushing 4 passers at a quarterback and hoping to get Simmons isolated on a tackle. And at that point, it's pretty easy. Sometimes the defense just plays itself if you're at 3rd and 8 and you have the best pass rusher in the nation, best twitch rusher, I guess would be the way you'd say it. And then truly he has to figure it out on the back end when it comes to the portal. I think Derek Williams is really, really reevaluating his decision right about now, because this is a coach who's going to want Jelani McDonald down near close to the ball, which I think should have been done more last year anyway. And he's going to want a true over-the-top guy. So I think DKW just said in the chat, he's going to want someone that can just play free safety. And I think that's where Jonah Williams would be good. But Jonah hasn't played a lot of football, and he's going to play baseball again this year. So either it's Williams or, hey, Derek, you made a mistake. We're just going to find 2.0 version of you and play someone over top. But I do think some of the personnel works. It's just, let's get that nose. Obviously, you need your Mike backer there. He's got to hand select that guy and maybe a second guy out of the portal because it's so thin there. And then whoever plays over top, that guy's got to know what he's doing out there.
No, really well said, man. And again, you got to find a nose tackle. You've got to find guys that you can trust in the linebacking room. Is this a situation, and this is for anybody that wants it, you see a situation in which Texas does have a very difficult schedule. You're going to have a year 2 Julian Sand. You're still going to have a Jeremiah Smith around. Ohio State is likely to have an improved running game. You have a trip to Neyland Stadium in September, turned around with the Oklahoma game. Is this a spot where you might see a little bit of Texas struggles early on in the season as they're getting acclimated to Will Muschamp, as Will Muschamp is getting acclimated to his personnel, but you see a team that really starts to figure out the scheme, the system, and therefore the results on the field, follow later in the year?
Yeah, so I think what you'll see is something very similar to what happened with Georgia this year, where early in the year, it wasn't the full expansive defense that they normally run, where if you compare what they were in 23 and 24 and 22 to what they were early in the year this year, there's a difference in terms of what they're calling. They're a lot more basic on 1st and 2nd down. The pressure paths aren't as exotic. It's a little bit more of, we're going to put our guys in position to execute while they figure out the playbook and while they understand how to consistently figure out ways to understand what's going on and read the game. So early in the year, you're going to see something that's maybe a little bit more vanilla, where you're maybe not seeing them play, where you're maybe not seeing the most exotic paths, where you're not seeing a lot of different stuff that's mind-blowing. But you'll see that later in the year. It won't be one of those things where they'll struggle because because the scheme's too much. That's just generally not how they are. They're all really good teachers, but more importantly, they'll do what their players are good at. And then as the year goes on, they'll add more and more, and the playbook will become denser.
Really well said, man. Again, we had same sentiment on Georgia this year. You could definitely tell that they weren't getting into their full range of things. As the season went on, those guys have really started to figure things out. They've gotten to dive into a bit more of their bag of tricks, And so when you have Kirby at the helm, like that's going to be a thing. He's always going to be able to teach and help the defense grow. I definitely see the same thing out of Will Muschamp. Now, let me ask you this, and again, for anyone that wants to take it, we saw Texas on 2nd and 15 in the Arkansas game. We saw them on 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10, 3rd and 12 many times throughout the year. Playing some very, very soft coverage out here, at least talking about by alignment. Lining up 8, 10, 12 yards off the guys or off the receivers on the outside at times, and just giving up a lot of free stuff under the middle. Do y'all foresee that being an issue? Do you see more man coverage? Do you see more press coverage? Again, we're kind of picking out the differences between Muschamp and PK, and that's kind of PK's thing. Play off a little bit, give up a lot of underneath, part of his bend but don't break strategy. What do y'all think that looks like under new again coordinator Will Muschamp?
I mean, when I watch both Muschamp and PK call defenses, I feel like one of the big things that jumps out to me that is a difference is I feel like Muschamp's a lot more aggressive whenever he calls games. I mean, I think his personality matches how he calls the game a lot of times. So I think on a lot of these third downs, you could see a lot more aggression than we saw the past 5 years with PK. I just think it depends, 3rd and long or if it's 3rd and short or whoever it's in. I think you're definitely going to see a lot more pressure being brought on third downs to confuse the quarterback, make him cause him to make mistakes, maybe get some turnovers on those. But I definitely think that you'll see a lot more aggression and calls than you have with PK throughout his 5 years.
I definitely agree. What about you guys?
Well, I do think one thing, this is not to go on like some tangent about what PK was bad about. He was a good coordinator for Texas, but sometimes he'd have these athletes where it's just so easy to get them to show their athleticism. I think of Simmons and Anthony Hill, where it's just natural. If they're on the field, it's going to happen. Sometimes it felt like the guys who were great athletes but weren't quite just the level player those guys didn't have their athleticism unlocked quite the same way. That's maybe coming with safety blitzes. Again, I think McDonald was a little bit misused this year, and he still had a good season. He still took a noticeable jump in his production. I don't think of that as maybe Malik Muhammad, but Jalen Gilbo was someone that probably shouldn't have been playing outside corner, and he's not some elite speed guy, but he can get down and get to a runner in the flat. You see it every time he has a one-on-one tackle in the flat. He didn't miss a lot of those tackles. So I do think that's what Muschamp will bring a little bit better is I have this athlete. That's a tool. That's something I can use here. Let's find a pressure package for Ty Anthony Smith that works instead of the NASCAR package works a lot, but it just kind of merged these guys together instead of on third down. If we can get one Ty Anthony Smith blitz, and then we have another that gets Terry out on a tackle one-on-one, and then you have one that gets McDonald at the ball, and maybe you have one where you got Grayson Littleton wherever he's playing coming from a wider zone and blitzing out there. I think he's going to be a little better at getting the good, not perfect athletes like the Hill Simmons types into more successful positions on the field.
Oh, well said, man. And how about you, Pac? Is Texas going to see more press out there from corners?
Yeah, so you'll see more press from alignment. That's generally, again, that's their camp rule. So they start from press, and especially with their outside corners and almost every coverage that they run. Now, the difference between what you'll see with what you saw last year with Kwiatkowski and what you're going to see from Muschamp and what you see a lot from teams like Georgia or like Oregon is when they start in press, you'll see them open and you'll see them get into a shuffle, right? And all that means is it's just like a basketball shuffle, right? If anyone's ever played basketball and if you've ever been to a basketball practice and you work on shuffling your feet or staying in front of a defender, just think of that. So they'll use either a 3-step shuffle or a 5-step shuffle, and that's dependent on how they want to tempo the receiver. Depends on what route concepts they see a lot. So that's one of the ways they do that a lot out of cover 3. They'll do it occasionally out of quarters when they're running more of a like soft form of quarters where it's something like base quarters. So you'll see that. So it's typically we're going to start from press. Now, when people think of press, they often think of a hard press where you're jamming at the line of scrimmage. It's a two-hand jam. You're aiming for the chest. That's not really what they do. So they're going to play with an inch technique. So most of the time what that means is what you're really doing is you're trying to read the release of the receiver. So you're inching back with your feet. It's called an inch technique because if you're starting like this with your feet, you're just doing this. It's a step replaced with little inches, and you're doing that to figure out which way is the receiver going to release, and then to whatever side they release. So say they're releasing over here. So then with my right arm, I'm jamming and I'm trying to hit his chest. I'm trying to reroute. So basically what you're doing is your wrong arm jamming once you know what side they're releasing to. So you'll see that a lot in terms of when they're playing press. You'll also see them play with a motor, which is the same thing as an inch, except just remove the jam. So you saw Manny Muhammad do this a lot 2 years ago in the 2024 season. And if you've ever felt frustrated watching that, no, that's an actual thing that's called a motor technique. A lot of teams do this. It's a really good way of leading up to an inch technique because there's a lot of footwork needed to get into an inch technique. There's a lot of little things that are needed when you're working to a jam. You need to be in the right spot with your feet. It's feet, then hands when you're working to an inch. And that's something a lot of young corners really struggle with is they'll shoot their hands too soon and they'll get out of position. So you'll see a motor and an inch. You'll almost never see a hard jam. They just don't teach that. There's just almost no application of it anyway. So you'll see press as a base alignment. Now that can change. There's certain coverages where they'll play off by about 6 yards. There's a lot of quarters, 3-by-1 coverages where they'll do that. So it's a little bit of give and take there. There'll be you'll see more press than you did last year, but it'll also depend on what's happening throughout the year and what the corners are comfortable with, because again, a lot of it is dependent on personnel.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to play to your personnel. I know that you've mentioned in the past, before this show through text that, it all depends on who you have and what you are. I mean, that's Texas isn't going to make, and Will Muschamp isn't going to have these guys doing something, year in, year out the exact same way. He's going to match it based on personnel, what they're capable of. And so, again, you got to appreciate that a quality defensive mind that's going to be able to come in and still have, a major input on things, even though the personnel might slightly change or tweak from year to year. And so, again, I could definitely see, some early, maybe not necessarily struggles. Maybe there are struggles as he's fully getting these guys in. Because, again, Texas wasn't playing inch technique. You got to work these things and rep them, and before you can go out there and do them against some really damn good talent that's going to be on the schedule, man. Because, again, Texas has 10 real ball games next year. And then they have to deal with UTSA and Texas State and those fun offenses in that tempo. So should provide a great opportunity for a lot of fun reps. And so excited to see really who takes this hiring and makes the most of it. Is there a name that jumps out to your mind that when you think of Will Muschamp and you know what he brings style wise, anybody that jumps out to your mind about who would benefit the most from Will being in town?
Yeah. So really quick, just to answer 2 questions that I see in the comments. Woodcrest, it was Saban and Kirby who implemented the mint front. They did it together in 2015. That was about the first time. Muschamp will not run a 4-3 or a 5-2. He will not do that. I can tell you that right now. Bobby Petronic, yeah, he'll just be a 4-2-5 against everyone in the SEC who's playing out of 11 personnel. And then the last one, Kirby Smart does not call plays on situational downs. That is Glenn Schumann who does it entirely for them. He's been doing that since 2022.
Okay.
And then Tyler Atkinson. He would be the guy that, to me, when he was going through his recruitment and I was talking to people in Georgia at the time, I thought it was an odd fit at Texas under Pete Kwiatkowski, truthfully. That it was just a much better fit at Georgia because of the way he plays for Grayson. He plays as a stack track fallback linebacker, and that is what Will Muschamp is. In terms of their linebackers, it's a stack fit. So that's another thing that we don't have time for today, but it's a way of fitting the run. It's how they fit it out of Mint. Tyler Atkinson fits that to a T. He's going to be incredible at that. So this is a really awesome fit for him. I think it works really well with Bo Barnes too. He's the exact body type that they really, really like. So those would be the two. I think those are the two linebackers that I'd be really excited for. And then Cade Phillips and Kobe Black, I think they're going to be really good. I do think they're going to play more press just because of how long they are. I think they're going to play really well in terms of being corners. So that would be my 4 guys.
I like that. Anybody from you, Clint, you, Evan, anybody that Pac didn't mention that is really going to benefit from Will Muschamp?
I mean, he's Phillips and Atkinson were literally the first 2 that came to my mind. I think of Phillips as one of these just so built for the NFL. He's going to go play 3 years at Texas, and no matter where he gets drafted in the draft, he'll go play and start in the NFL. And I think this maybe aligns a little bit more with getting closer to a receiver and getting your hands in the way of passes, because PBUs and interceptions have not been a big thing for Texas. It's been a lot of the other types of success in turnovers and havoc for that defense. I do think Justice Terry, the Georgia guys, I think that's another one where, like I mentioned earlier, just he's such a defensive end. He's not quite a defensive tackle, get gnarly in the trenches. You want to let him be explosive and be a little bit twitchy against guards. And I think if it's not directly this season as a starter, it's going to be the next one where he really shines.
Yeah, I definitely see a situation where he comes on mid-season, really late in the season, and then I do agree. 2027, he should be an absolute handful on the football field. I get this comment, David Keith Williams, and again, I really do appreciate you always being in here night in, night out, my man. It means a lot. He says, I do understand the fan base's excitement because Coach Muschamp has been a great defensive coach, but before he gets excited, he wants to see production at Texas during his tenure. And that's an okay stance to take, man. I will say, this and Dwayne Keener are 2 completely different scenarios, in my opinion. Age alone, experience alone. You look at what Will Muschamp has still been very desired by college football head coaches as far as being a part of their staffs. And it's a guy that put family first, hung out in Georgia where it made sense for him to still be involved coaching a little bit or analyzing. And then also to be able to have the family time that he was after. And, I definitely understand that. So not a bad take at all, David. I definitely get kind of being in sit and wait mode. I understand that. Bubba, I appreciate you being in here, my man. And again, we're going to have Pac on here. He'll continue breaking things down. And we're always going to try to get as much on, the average scheme knowers level that we can. He knows a lot more than most. And that's not just you, my man, myself as well. But it is a lot of fun to sit here and look at 17 years ago, and you have this fire, you have this passion, you have the whiteboard scene. Before that, though, and I don't know, I don't even know if you were born yet, but when he was the defensive coordinator at Auburn, and Gene Chizik, I believe, was a head coach, and there's a clip of Coach Boom, and I think they're playing Arkansas, and the play ends up on the sideline, right next to the coaches for Auburn. And they're not trying to get what Will said live, but the audio picks it up. And this is when Arkansas had Darren McFadden and Felix Jones in the backfield. And this is where Coach Boom came from. I don't know if y'all remember this clip, but he lets out a very loud boom, followed with some explicitives, knock this kid out, essentially. So, I mean, he wasn't even my coach. And right then in that moment, I was like, man, like that, I can get behind that. And just having that back in Austin, I think that's what the excitement is for. You see a lot of people that are excited to have the passion, to have that energy. And then again, a lot of people do know that Sarkisian wanted Will Muschamp when Sarkisian was hired by Texas. Ultimately, Will decided to stay around Georgia, and for good reason. Again, we've mentioned the family aspect just a little bit earlier, but that to me, that's where the excitement comes from. Now, the hard question. The tough question, is this enough? Is this enough to overcome some issues on the offensive side of the ball? Is this enough adjusting in the coaching staff for you guys?
No. I made a tweet about this, and I didn't name any names, but the fact that Chad Scott and Pete Kwiatkowski were the first 2 guys that were let go of on the staff is very interesting. Like a bingo card, that's not what it would have been on it. I've said my opinion publicly about Kyle Flood. I do think, the tackles have been good under him, but the guard play and the center play has to be different. And we won't know about this team until you start talking transfer portal, and the Andrews decision is one that I think is going to get a little bit more interesting the more time goes on, because does he really fit into what Texas wants to be, especially at the price tag? But it's so much about this offense is dictated on the portal, where I think a little less on defense outside of linebacker is that I can't really make a take about how good this team will be until we're out of January and we know who RB1 is, whether that be you tampered for a guy at Florida or you found a good player in the portal. I like Hollywood Smothers is a dude who probably could be playing in the NFL next year. We'll see if he gets a good NIL check. And then are you going to get someone new at receiver? And if so, what kind of player is that? How many on the offensive line? Is it going to be 3 or is it going to be 5 or 6? I just can't know until then.
Oh, that's a very fair take. I mean, at some point you start to think, if you did get the changes that you're asking for, that many of us are asking for, it's not just you alone in that, Evan. That's a lot of rehauling before a very big 2026 season with Arch Manning at the helm. Now you have to think, like, there's a pretty good chance where they believe, hey, if we just upgrade the talent on the interior at guard and at center, and then you improve the talent in the backfield, that hey, these issues start to take care of themselves. For me, it gets a little bit deeper than that. I think there's a lot of scheme and some technique issues. What about you, Pac? What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. To me, I kind of think some of the stuff with the offense is a little bit related to, in terms of, I don't think, like, for example, I don't think there needs to be new OC. To me, I don't think the issue is about Sarkisian as a play caller. I think there's external factors that have been impacting the past 2 seasons. Again, it's kind of hard with the offensive line because the recruiting's been pretty poor. I think that's fair to say. I don't think they've done a good job of identifying guys and then going and getting them. But it's tough because you've had really good tackle play. And Kyle Flood is a guy that is really well respected in coaching circles. He's a guy that if he gets fired, he's going to get a really, really big time job almost immediately. So whenever you fire someone, you have to think of who are you going to get. And I don't know who Texas is going to get. I'm not sure that they're going to get Sam Pittman. I'm not sure that he's going to come back to coaching all that soon. So it's a little bit of, until you know who the alternative is, I lean towards no. Or something with wide receiver coach, I'd be fine moving on from Chris Jackson because Texas is going to get a really good wide receiver coach. This is Steve Sarkisian, right? You go and look at his track record with wide receivers. In the past 6 years, he has something like 6 first-rounders. We're talking Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, Jalen Waddle, Matthew Golden, Adonai Mitchell. I'm sure there's one other or 2 others that I'm forgetting about. Devontae Smith, right? So that's a lot of talent that he's produced. It's a lot of first-rounders. So I don't think it matters who the wide receiver coach is, but I think it's hard to tell until you know who the alternative is.
Oh, well said. Anybody for you, Clint? I mean, we don't have to get into naming names or anything like that, but would you like to see more changes, and this time being on the offensive side of the ball?
Yeah, so I share Pac's sentiment in regards to Chris Jackson because, he hasn't been here super long to where you can truly see, I feel like, the results of his development. But also what I have noticed is that ever since, I would say, 2023, the only receiver that we've had that has been recruited to Texas that has really made a huge impact was Xavier Worthy. The others were all transfers. You had A.D. Mitchell from Georgia. You had Isaiah Bond from Alabama. You had Matthew Golden from Houston. You have a lot of these transfer guys that end up being your big receivers and the guys who get the most receptions. And this year we had Emmett Mosley. Unfortunately, he had the injury, so you couldn't see him for really the first half of the year. But I feel like the receiving took a step back this year, which when you don't have the experience that we had the past 2 years, you're obviously going to see that. But I definitely wouldn't mind if we were to go and grab Rashad Samples from Oregon, for example. I mean, he's coached receivers before, and he was at Texas before. Did a great job. But O-line, it is a little bit weird for me because the 2 years before it wasn't great necessarily. I won't say like it was exactly like the Joe Moore finalist that the media portrayed it to be. But I feel like once they figured out the O-line, once they got Connor Robertson at the center and moved Cole Hudson to left guard and they kind of got their set offensive line for the last portion of the year. It looked a lot better. Wasn't amazing. I'm not going to say it was, but other than that, I don't think you get a coach unless you know who you're already getting, because with CDC, you see a lot of times he does not, when he fires someone, that next coach is there like in a snap. I mean, you see it very rarely where a coach is fired and we don't have a guy who's in place for another week or another 2 weeks or something like that. So until you know the guy, I wouldn't fire anybody. And this is my last part of it. I won't go too long, but with the offensive struggles, I feel like a lot of it has been not so much on Sark. It's been in 2024, you had Quinn go down in game 3, and then for the rest of that year, he kind of had that lingering injury that continued to plague him, and which affected a lot of parts of your offense, especially in the red zone for sure. And then in 2025, it was just, it was the O-line play. That it's just no other way to say it. And also, I will say the play calling for that first part. You can't run that style of offense that we're running when you don't have the O-line to be able to protect Arch, because when you have these long developing plays that you're constantly running, especially on third downs, and you're not able to get protection, you're not going to succeed with that. Arch is going to be getting sacked all day. I mean, you saw in the Florida game with the prime example of, I think it was maybe 7 or 8 sacks. I could be wrong, but it was a very high number. But I wouldn't say the biggest problem has been Sark. I think it's just been a lot of luck swinging the other way, in my opinion. That's just the best way I can say it. But I think play caller wise, we're fine. I just think if you're going to replace Kyle Flood or Chris Jackson, which I wouldn't mind, I think you need to have your guy in place before you make a move like that.
No, and that's the way we've seen Texas, and it really just all the Texas athletic department operate since CDC came around. You know, there always is a guy that is being announced as a hire as soon as the firing, or, you know, you going the opposite way of somebody. You know, they always seem to know what they're doing. I've made it pretty clear how I feel. I mean, again, I think a lot of people would look really good as an O-line coach or a play caller if you have a Bijan Robinson in the Big 12 and you have a hammer right behind him and Roshan Johnson, and you have the speed of a Keelan Robinson and guys like that. So, again, I'm not here to throw dirt on anybody. I wouldn't mind a couple of changes on the offensive side of the ball is where I'll leave it. That was a bigger issue than defense this year. And so when people are asking, you know, wasn't the issue the offense? Why are you making a change at DC? I don't have an issue with that comment, but also, yeah, we do need to improve the offense in a couple of capacities. Now, as far as the DC, PK was good, okay, but Will Muschamp has proven at times that he has been great. We need to see it again. It's been a while. He did have a big hand in Georgia's game plans against Texas. Joshy, I saw that comment up there somewhere. I'm not going to find it though. But so, yeah, I get Texas being excited, but at the same time, like, there's still fixes and changes that need to happen on the offensive side of the ball. Now, I will say this: if you were to land and successfully get somebody to enter the portal from the Southeast or other schools, you know, having a big dog that you can turn and immediately hand the ball to, like that is a first and very big fix to fixing the run game for Texas. So start there, work on the interior of the O-line. Who's coaching those guys? You know, like, you know, I understand the dynamic there. I definitely do. He is a good coach. He would immediately get it poached up and get another really big job if we were to part ways. I just feel like we need to see more from that group. I need to see more nasty. I need to see more, and we need to be stronger at the point of attack. And so strength and conditioning, we've had a couple of comments about that on screen tonight. Strength and conditioning, you know, I mean, a better strength and conditioning program is going to go a long way for an offensive line too. So I've been pretty quick to jump on offensive line tutelage and leadership this year. But at the same time, there are other factors. There's factors that, like Arch having the yips, receivers not being able to, you know, all these things go hand in hand. You know, if the quarterback can't help out the O-line or the running game, and the running game is not helping out the O-line or the quarterback, you know, it gets pretty tough to be a play caller and to move the damn football. So I don't think Texas is going to stand pat. I sure hope that they do not. But yeah, I mean, time will tell in that regard. Now, fellas, we've reached the hour mark. Y'all have any other topics, any other questions, comments that y'all would like to bring up before we get you out of here? Nope, all good. One last thing.
Yeah, actually, one thing. I got one thing.
Yes, sir.
Joey Austin, I would not go after Blake Gideon if I was Texas. I would be going after Travarius Robinson. He knows that system about as well as anyone could. He's Will Muschamp's best friend. He's an incredible recruiter. No to Justin Wilcox. Get guys who actually know the Saban system. It makes no sense to bring someone who has not run it, who's never installed it. Go get T-Rob, and then you're fine. That's the only answer that you should be having. It would, to me, I would be pretty surprised and a little confused if it ends up being Gideon and you don't bring T-Rob with him.
He recruits safeties and the state of Florida very well for Georgia. I mean, he's the guy that does that for them.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's got many skins on the wall at a couple of different stops. And so that is a big name. We'll have an eye on Blake Gideon. Of course, Blake Gideon played underneath Will Muschamp at Texas. There's got to be a little bit of a relationship there. And Gideon left Texas to elevate his career, and he has very much done so. I think he likely jumps at a chance to return to Austin. But again, T-Rob is a very big name. And yeah, a lot of people do assume it's a given, but we had to bring it up because Gideon's name is out there. And there are a lot of people who think, he's got a good opportunity to end up back in Burnt Orange. So I don't know. It's only $1 million, man. They're only paying him $1 million over there at Georgia Tech. And while he's done a good job, I believe a lot of folks at Inside Texas felt like he really didn't want to leave in the first place. But I mean, again, you got to go elevate your career and got to look out for yourself. And so I definitely understand it. Not a guy I hold any ill will or bad blood with. Would be nice to have the guy back in Burnt Orange, but if T-Rob is the guy, you better buckle in and be okay with that because he's a hell of a recruiter, hell of a coach. And again, maybe there's a role for both. So time will tell. I do appreciate everybody watching tonight. I'd love if y'all go through a like on this video, retweet it if you're watching on X, and go tell a friend to tell a friend about it. All right, guys, these guys are doing a great job. We'd had to get in here and get a little schematic breakdown on Will Muschamp and get everybody's thoughts. So I don't think Texas is done. It's going to be a wild and wacky couple of weeks. So hop on over to Inside Texas, take advantage of the $1 flash sale, become a part of our community right now, guys, for just a single buck. Thanks again for watching. We'll catch y'all all next time.